Welcome to Alpha Kappa Psi's webinar titled Women in Business Leadership Positions. This webinar is part 2 in the Women in Business Leadership Positions series, each part of the Leadership Development series. My name is Mackenzie Lauka, and I serve AK Psi as the Associate Director of Education. I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics regarding the audio and web-based features of today's program. In order to verify attendance, you should have linked to the GoToWebinar meeting room through the web link provided in your confirmation email. To access the PowerPoint handout, click the plus sign next to the handouts on your screen. Click the name of the handout to download the file. This webinar will be advanced remotely. At the end of the program, I'll explain how you can ask a question to our presenter. If you have a question throughout the program, feel free to type it into the question box on your screen or tweet it using the hashtag AKPsiChat. Your questions will be asked at the end of the program in the order they're received. After the webinar has ended, a link to the recording will be emailed to you so you can review the PowerPoint at a later date. Be sure to also check out our social media content. Portions of today's program will be tweeted with the hashtag AKPsiChat. You can also find some valuable resources on the AKPsi blog, Facebook page, Instagram feed, LinkedIn page, Twitter feed, and our YouTube channel, all of which can be accessed from the akpsi.org homepage. As mentioned previously, today's webinar is part of the Women in Business Leadership series. These webinars have been organized to hear the personal stories of successful businesswomen, examine what it means to be a woman in the professional business field, discuss tips for success upon entering the workforce, and finally to summarize what it takes to be a successful female professional. Our guest for today is entrepreneur and businesswoman Jen Kuhn. Jen is a former member of the board of directors and is the future owner of Hamburg Overhead Door, Western New York's largest garage door company. Thanks for joining us today, Jen, and let's go ahead and get started. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
All right, thank you so much, Mackenzie. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. As Mackenzie said, my name is Jen Kuhn, and I am a brother of the Gamma Zeta chapter from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I am a life member of Alpha Kappa Psi. I currently reside in Hamburg, New York, which is a large community that is south of Buffalo, New York. And as I was saying to Mackenzie earlier today, I'm happy to report that there is no snow here. So glad to report it's sunny. And Hamburg is a small town, like I said, south of Buffalo. And I'm going to give you the kind of the life story of me here and hopefully answer some questions about women in business. And where I'm going to start is about my family's background. So it starts with my dad. And my dad had a girlfriend in high school, and her dad had a garage door company. And it starts with my dad ended up not marrying this girlfriend, but when he was 16, he started out sweeping the warehouse for this gentleman and began hanging garage doors for him. My mom and dad ended up getting married when they were 18 and 20 years old. My dad installed the garage doors, and my mom would go out with him on the jobs for him sometimes. They ended up buying the business from the owner in 1989 and moved the business to their home. My mom did the books, the payroll, and showed garage doors to the customers. And she did all of this while taking me to piano, flute, dance, and softball, tennis, and all sorts of other lessons while raising my brother and I. My parents ended up buying the business in 1989. At that time, there were 8 employees. Currently, we have 4 businesses spread out between 3 locations, including one in Syracuse, New York, which is about 3 hours away from us, and we have 63 employees. During that time, between now and 1989, we have also purchased 3 competitors as well. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background between that time when my dad started working for the gentleman in the early 1960s and now today. So my background. Ever since I was a little girl, I wanted to be a pediatrician. But then in the 9th grade, I took a business class called Introduction to Occupation. And the first or second week of school, the teacher sat down with each one of us and asked us what our parents did. And as I sat down with him, I was kind of embarrassed, honestly, to tell him, but I made a face and I said, my parents sell garage doors. But I said they do have their own business. And he asked me, would I want to write a manual on starting my own garage door company? And at this time, I was 14 years old. And I said, I don't know, how would I do that? And he said, well, I'll help you do it. And I'm sure your parents would be willing to help you do that too. And he was asking me this because he was also the DECA advisor. So for those of you that don't know what DECA is, currently they call it, it's a marketing association that prepares emerging leaders and entrepreneurs for careers in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management in high schools and colleges around the globe. Back then, it used to stand for Distributive Education Clubs of America. So what I did that year was competed in the entrepreneurship written event, which was a 30-page manual. So I had to prepare financial statements, a marketing plan, basically a whole business plan. And again, I was only 14 years old, so if you can think back to you being 14 years old. I know some of you might only be 18 or 19, but imagine writing a business plan at that age. So I had to interview people in my parents' industry and all around Hamburg and gather data, and it allowed me to gain insight into the garage door business. I also had to prepare a 10-minute presentation and present it to 3 judges who then asked me questions for 5 minutes about my business plan. I placed third place in states, which afforded me to go on to the national competition in Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. And there I competed against students from all across the country. Now, I didn't end up winning there at the national competition, but it gave me a chance to travel. And by the time I was done with my freshman year of high school, at that point I knew I wanted to go into the family business and eventually take it over. And to this day, I have lunch with my DECA advisor once a year, and every time my parents see the DECA advisor, they thank him, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I am today working in the family business. So I continued on competing with DECA and went on in different events. The next year I competed in only a 9-page manual, and then went on in other events. And I also held many different leadership positions. I had chapter officer positions, and I was also the regional president my senior year. So when I graduated high school and went on to college, I thought I was going to go and start a Delta Epsilon Chi chapter, which is the equivalent to DECA in college at the University of Colorado, where I attended school. And so when I got to CU, there wasn't one on campus. So I thought, okay, I'll just go and start one. But I looked around and saw that there were other business fraternities that were already established. And at the University of Colorado, they had Delta Sigma Pi and Alpha Kappa Psi. So my freshman year, I didn't get involved in any extracurricular activities. And I guess I'll back up a second. My sophomore and junior year, I started looking at colleges, and I knew that I wanted to go away to school. And I started telling people my junior year that I was going to go to the University of Colorado. And my parents actually got mad at me because they said, you don't know that you're going to go there yet. And I said, yes, I am. And they said, no, you haven't even applied there yet. And I said, I'm going to Colorado. And I talked to my guidance counselor, and he said, I think Colorado would be great for you, either Colorado or Colorado State. And I ended up applying at both the University of Colorado and Colorado State and University at Buffalo in all of their business programs, and got into the University of Colorado. And as soon as I saw it, knew that's where I wanted to go so that I could come back to Buffalo and be in the family business. But I knew that if I didn't get out for school, I would never leave Buffalo and that I would probably regret it. So that's why I chose to go to the University of Colorado. So as I was there freshman year, I just wanted to focus on my classes and academics and get settled in. So sophomore year, I looked around and I didn't see the Delta Epsilon Chi, but I did see these other two business fraternities. And I thought, okay, maybe it'll be easier if I see something that's already established. So I went to both of their meetings at the beginning of the year. And Delta Sigma Pi was a pretty big chapter. I think they had about 120 brothers. Alpha Kappa Psi at that time on the University of Colorado school grounds had about 40. And I liked the fact at that time that Alpha Kappa Psi was smaller. So I went to their rush events. And plus I'll say this, my boyfriend at the time who was back in Buffalo, he was pledging Delta Sigma Pi. So I liked the fact that we had some competition there too. So made me want to join Alpha Kappa Psi even more. So I pledged and became a brother for Alpha Kappa Psi. Immediately, I got a spot on the board, and digging back in my brain, I think I was the vice president of operations. And now this was the beginning of my junior year. And a lot of people had graduated, and our numbers started dwindling. And we honestly did not have the best presidents. So at that time, the president that we did have did not have a rush event. So we didn't have any pledges. And that was a very big oops, as all of you know, I'm sure, on this call. So we could see, a few of us, that the chapter was going down the tubes fast. So at the end of the semester, things weren't looking too good. And at the end of that semester, I can still remember like yesterday that the president, his name was Terry, and he came over to my apartment and he literally handed me a box and said, well, we talked and we voted you as the next president. I'm going abroad next year. So good luck with everything. And that was it. I was the next president of our Gamma Zeta chapter. How many of you have been in a situation like that? I know I can't see you, but I'm hoping not a lot of you are raising your hands, but if you have, I'm sure you can relate. So it's the end now of my, actually it must have been the end of my, it was the end of my junior year. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? It was the summer. I headed home to Buffalo. So there I was in Buffalo, and I got a letter from Alpha Kappa Psi in the mail that said, you have been summoned to Indianapolis for a trial. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it was because we didn't meet the minimum standard. We didn't have rush. We didn't have any pledges, so we didn't have any initiates. And our chapter had dwindled down. So we were put on probation by Brian Parker, who, as a lot of you may know, is still with Alpha Kappa Psi. So I started freaking out and called Brian, and he said, don't worry. We're going to put a plan in place with you next year. You don't have to come to Indianapolis, but we have to put you on probation, and we're going to put a plan in place. You have to have these things done. You have to have rush. You have to have pledges. We have to get initiatives. I thought, okay, I'm going to put a plan in place when I get back to Colorado. And when I got back, we only had 4 brothers left in our chapter. That was it. So we put our heads together. We had countless meetings, some at my apartment, and we held rush meetings. We put flyers up. We chalked the sidewalks. We had dinners with pledges, and we had a lot of events. And that year we ended up getting 12 pledges, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but for growth-wise, that was huge. So I believe then the next spring, I wasn't president anymore, but I was graduating and got to oversee how the chapter was going. And I think we got another 25. So it kept growing and growing. And if you were to see Gamma Zeta now, as I see when I get to go to convention every other year, they consistently have over 100 brothers every year. And it's never gotten to that point ever again. And I can't say enough how proud I am that I was a part of the Gamma Zeta chapter. So I'm going to turn it back over to Mackenzie, and we're going to talk about entering the workforce, or if there's anything Mackenzie wants to add before I go on to the next slide. Okay, I'm going to continue on.
Oh.
All right.
So I wanted, yeah,
Are
Jen, I want to touch, yes, I wanted to jump first back on just to touching on a few things that Eileen Howell touched on in her webinar.
Okay.
Women are now earning bachelor's degrees more than men. Women are taking the GMAT more than ever they have before. A third of all master's degrees are awarded to women. The U.S. workforce is now 50% women, and it's growing faster than males. Women own 28% of all businesses in the U.S., and out of the 500 largest U.S. corporations, 24 of those CEOs are female. So those are some pretty incredible statistics. And what are some of your thoughts on that, Jen, with how women are doing in the business?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Yeah, what are your thoughts on these statistics and how women are growing in the workforce?
I'm seeing it more and more so. The thing for me in Buffalo, I want to say Buffalo might be a little bit different than the rest of the U.S., and we here are seeing a huge growth. And it was a lot different than it was back 11 years ago when I moved back here. It was a little dismal, to say the least. And when I moved back here, I helped reinitiate, I think it's Beta Iota, at the University at Buffalo. And I recall telling them, please stay here. And the chapter was predominantly female. And what I was telling them is get jobs in the Buffalo area. And that was not happening as tradition because they were going elsewhere. But what is happening nowadays is that people, I'm in a different situation because I'm in a family business, but more and more people are starting their own businesses. And Buffalo, for example, we have things going on like our Buffalo Medical Campus. We have solar energy. I mean, people are bringing things to Buffalo, and it's creating jobs. And there are more and more women that are entering the workforce, I think, than ever. And I think I don't want to say it was a stigma, but where more traditionally, where women stayed home to raise families, that's not the norm anymore. We have families that it's two people are working nowadays. So I see that more and more. And for me, I'm in construction, and I'll talk about that a little bit later and if anybody has questions about it. But I see more and more women in the construction field than ever. I'm a part of a group that is called Women in Construction because they're seeing that, and there are advantages for us in construction that they want to reward people with that because there aren't enough women that do that. So it's a great thing. So I'm seeing it more and more, and it's a great thing for us out there. So there's advantages like there never were ever before, I believe.
That's great. That's great to hear that you're seeing that. So now let's kind of jump back into you now that we kind of set the stage a little bit. And you did mention how you kind of found your passion. You went to DECA and you joined Alpha Kappa Psi. What are some things that you can recommend to other people that may not know what their passion is yet?
The best thing I would say is starting, the people that are on this call are already in college, and Mackenzie and I had a conversation about this prior to this call, but it's not too late for those on this call to have internships. And I am on a board that deals with high school students, and they are starting internships already in high school. And I had one in high school. I didn't do an internship in college, but I had one that helped me with marketing, and it allowed me to see that I really enjoyed marketing, and that's part of my role here at Hamburg Overhead Door. So internships are awesome because it allows you to see what you can be passionate about or what you're not passionate about. We find out so many times, and it's allow you to do that without that commitment of saying, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And another thing about the word passion, I think, and I love the fact that it's the title of what this whole seminar is about, but I'm 37 years old, and I still have some friends that are 37, 35, even not as old as myself, but they're still trying to find their passion and make a living at it. And I have said to them, sometimes we can't all make a career doing our passion, but we still have to make a career, whether it's the 8 to 5 or 7 to 5, or sometimes the hours are not as ideal as what we have in our head. But sometimes I think society these days is getting so hung up on the word passion, and because what we're doing, the bulk of our life is working. And don't get me wrong, you really have to enjoy what you do because you're doing it the bulk of your life. But that doesn't mean you have to love it, but that you can't find something else to do outside of work and that be your passion also. I am fortunate that I really do enjoy what I do. And when people talk to me, I think they can sense that I love garage doors. I love the fact that we can make an instant impact on someone's house, and we're helping to solve a problem, and we have solutions for people, and that it's an immediate impact on someone's house. But it's a garage door, right? It's not a sexy product. It can be something else in someone's house. I could probably go sell and probably find the same passion about it. Again, if I had to switch industries, if something happened. But people, I think, get so hung up on passion. And unfortunately, I think sometimes the younger people get so hung up on that word that they struggle to find a career because it doesn't fit this mold. And I don't want people to get so hung up on it fitting into that. We need to let it expand a little bit. And if you're really passionate about something that isn't perfect, let it be something then you do on the weekends or outside of work, or it might be something that has to come later in life, and you do something earlier in life that does pay the bills and gets you through. But just make sure it's not something that you're miserable with, from that Monday through Friday or whatever it might be.
I think that's great. Now, you told me earlier that you didn't go straight into working for your family business. What did you end up doing first, and how do you think that's kind of helped you?
All right, this is a good story, at least I think so. So one night while we had it was an Alpha Kappa Psi resume workshop, and this was senior year. And I had already decided the summer before senior year that I didn't want to come back to the family business right away. I wanted to say that I wanted to stay out there. I always came home during the summer to work in the family business, but I never got to stay out in Colorado and really enjoy Colorado and really work for somebody else. I did some other things back here in Buffalo, but I never got to really work for somebody else. So when I told my parents that, they were not happy with me, to say the least. But they started to slowly get over that. So then at this recruiting event, I said, with Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we had the event, and afterwards, everybody left. And I stayed and talked with them and gave them the story that I just gave you about what happened with our chapter and how we were rebuilding and everything. And they said, well, what are you doing for a job afterwards? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I mean, I can go back to the family business in Buffalo, but I'm thinking about staying out here. And they said, well, okay, why don't you apply with us? And I said, well, tell me about the job. And now, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, renting cars to people and washing cars, and they wear suits, and the girls dress up in skirts and heels, pantyhose every day. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't sound too glamorous, especially just getting out of college with this business degree in management, human resources. So the HR girl said, no. We teach you hiring, firing, marketing, how to market yourself. It's something that would be awesome, and you can leave anytime. You can go back to the family business. We'll use you as long as you want to use us. I said, really? She's like, absolutely. So I went in, interviewed with her, interviewed with another branch manager, and then I interviewed with the regional manager. And then they even had to call my mom because she was my reference back home. And my mom was crying because she thought, oh my God, Jennifer's not going to come home ever. And the HR person said, don't worry, we'll take good care of her. And I got the job. So then I ended up working in the largest branch in Boulder, Colorado, and I worked my way up through 6 offices in 3.5 years. And my last branch had the main branch plus 4 satellite locations with 12 employees at my last stop. And it was a very tough job, but best thing that I ever did. And if you asked my parents now, they would tell you that it was the best thing that I ever did. It taught me all of those things. And it's something that I couldn't have gotten if I had come right back to working in the family business right after college. And probably one of the best things is that, A, I worked for somebody in corporate America versus just a small business. And B, I didn't just work for my parents. I've gotten the respect of everybody within our company because they knew I worked for somebody else. The business wasn't just handed right over to me. So then came what I like to say is the phone call. So one Saturday morning, and it was December 11th, 2004, it was about 7 o'clock my time because it was mountain time. My dad called, and he thought I was awake, that I'd be getting ready for work, but I had the day off. And he called and said, are you awake? And I said, no. And then he said, get up, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay, fine, I'm up. And he goes, I'm about to sell the business. I need to give them a decision by Monday. I said, what? What are you talking about? And he goes, I've been working on a deal. I had the opportunity to sell the business. Somebody came along and offered me money, and I've been working on it, and now I don't know what to do. I need you to tell me what I should do. So that woke me up very quickly. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you to do. All I can tell you is everything I've been doing since ninth grade has been preparing me to come and work in the family business with you. Becca, moving out to Colorado, getting my human resource management degree, working for Enterprise, everything I've been doing was to come and work for you. But I'm not going to make this decision for you if you don't want me to do it. He's like, well, I do, but what if it ruins our relationship? Because my dad and I are very close. And now I do have a brother who's in the business also, and he was working there still too at the time, but they aren't as close. And he's like, well, I don't know what to do. And I go, I want the opportunity if you'll let me. All I want to do is just try. And he said, okay. Now, there were some tears in there, too, with both of us, but he won't probably admit that. But he said, okay. Now, when can you move back? And I said, well, I'll be home for Christmas in, 10 days. I go, how about April 1st? He's like, January 1st. I said, no, I can't do it that fast. I need to take care of my employees. I had 12 employees, and Enterprise's motto was no 2 weeks notice. They were afraid you were going to rent a car or get in a car and drive it into a brick wall. So when you gave your notice, they pretty much fired you that day. So I had to make sure that everybody was all set because a bunch of them had tests coming up and I had to prepare them for. So I wanted to make sure everything was all set. So we compromised on March 1st. So I got everything wrapped up. I went home for Christmas, got an apartment here, all that stuff set up, skied a little bit, of course. It was Colorado, right? And I gave my notice, and Enterprise was gracious enough to allow me one extra day so that I could tell my employees the next day that I was leaving. And I flew home on February 28th, 2005, and I started work the next day, working at a home show the next night selling garage doors. So I jumped right into the fire and started learning the business all over again. And back then, I decided to give myself a title of Vice President of Operations and Marketing. And so one of the first things I had to do was we were using a marketing company to do all of our marketing. And it was going well, but my dad wanted me to start doing it. My mom had been doing it prior in the late 90s. And it was going well, but then we hired a marketing firm out of North Carolina. And they had really gotten us to the next level with TV advertising. And back then, people still used phone books. So they specialized in working with garage door companies. And my first major assignment was to fire them. How fun and lucky for me. So I did that. And so I learned the marketing side of the business pretty quickly by working with really nice sales reps who showed me the ropes. And they didn't mind because their commissions were higher when they sold direct to the clients rather than agencies. So I went to college for human resource management. So I helped my mom out with those responsibilities. And now I oversee the hiring and firing of all employees. And I do the plan administrator for all of our 401k plans. I oversee our health insurance plan, which has seen a lot of changes through the Affordable Care Act, even though there wasn't a lot because we were mostly already doing those things. And before I moved back, my dad was already paying 100% of our health employee benefits, but I kind of changed that when I moved back because family plans now cost $10,000 each. So we do about 60% of everybody's plans. Let's see what else. I also have the responsibility of our safety program, information and technology, and our website, running our sales meetings, and anything else to do with marketing. So as you can see, I wear a lot of hats as anything needs to do with family business. My father is young, does not plan on retiring soon. And as I joked with Mackenzie, because at first she had on the slides that Jennifer Kuhn is the owner of Hamburg Overhead Door. And I said, well, not yet, but someday I will be. And at least that is the plan. So my brother and I do plan on purchasing the business from my father. And he does not plan on giving it to us, and we do not plan on him handing it over to us. So we have gone to the bank and asked to get a loan, and we are in the middle of working out our succession plan. And now I will turn it back over to Mackenzie.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. You just mentioned, too, that you have you wear a lot of hats. So with that, kind of what are some obstacles that you have to deal with, just being a woman in the business and with all those different hats that you wear?
Well, definitely time management is definitely one of the biggest obstacles. And a lot of people ask me, how do I manage everything? And I just have to manage my time very well. I am a big planner. I do everything with with Google and all that, but I still write everything down on paper. So that's one of the things. But for me, it's getting in, I think myself, I'm my biggest challenge sometimes. I get inside my own head, and sometimes I just overthink things. I might think that I can't do it and that it's not possible. And what I've learned from watching my dad is not to overthink things. My dad doesn't overthink things, and I just think that's awesome. People will throw things at him, just a million things at a time. My dad can multitask like nobody else. And it's funny, if you watch a lot of different studies, they'll say that women can multitask better than men and that our brains are just wired for that. But some men can too, and my dad is one of those people. And I've learned that from watching him, and it's by not overthinking things. So sometimes I just have to say, I have to go with the first thing that pops in my head because I'll second guess myself. So that's one of the big things. Another thing is staying positive. Don't let the negative things get to you out there. And I'll give you a really good example of that. We're giving some surveys out there right now to customers, and we have a large database. We have 90,000 customers, and we aren't perfect. It's very difficult for us to be perfect and for any company to be perfect. And it's sending surveys out to everybody that has an email address. And this is going back over 12 years in the database. And I'm getting all the positive feedback, but I'm also seeing some of the negative feedback. So we're working on making things right, but you can't let the negative get you down and let the criticism. And that's hard with the internet these days because everybody wants to put things out there with negative reviews and Yelp and Facebook, all that kind of stuff, Google+. So you really got to stay positive mentally for yourself out there. So if you let all the negativity get to yourself, it'll really wear on you. So you have to do that. The other thing for me is being in a male-dominated field. And when I had just gotten back into the business after moving back, I did have some situations where men were calling me, oh, hey, sweetie, hey, honey, or they would purposely try to stump me at home shows. They would come by and just try to trick me or trick other people near me, because we have a lot of females that answer the phones and that are in customer service because women are our target market and demographic, and they feel more comfortable talking to us. But men would come up to us and try to do that. And I have found you can't let it bother you, and you can't be, for me, I can't be offended by it. If I feel that I can joke with them and joke back, I do, but if not, I just ignore it and can't let them, just don't deal with it. And, my dad is always telling me, don't let them treat me any different. I'm president of a builders association right now, which has 93 members, and I think there's about 6 of those businesses are female run. And my dad's telling me, don't let them treat you any different. And I'm not. I have to be firm and stand for what I believe in, and it's going pretty well right now. So that's what I do. And a little side note, I just jotted down as a note here that when I do go out on construction sites, I wear a hot pink hard hat. So I make sure that I stand out and don't let them treat me any different. So, and the guys like it. They start conversations with me. So
that's great, Jen. I love that.
Yeah.
So one thing that hasn't come up yet that you haven't mentioned is that you actually have previously been on the Alpha Kappa Psi Fraternity Board of Directors.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know, and I think our viewers would like to know, is what encouraged you to really stay involved? Because we always hear that membership doesn't end when you graduate, but a lot of people, they let it end. What's your advice on that and staying involved?
Yes. So as I said earlier, after college, I became a chapter advisor right away. And I became a chapter's advisor, which I do not necessarily recommend. I felt that I could hold them accountable enough, but I think it's better to become an advisor of another chapter if you're going to do that. But it didn't last that long anyways for me, because I don't think it was even 3 months, and I got a phone call when I was at work one day. And I thought it was a work call, but it was actually a fraternity brother calling me, who he just actually retired from the board. He had done a stint, then wasn't on there, and then was back on there. It was Brother Hastings, in a very deep voice said, "This is Brother Hastings, and I'm calling to see if you would like to become a regional director." And I thought, oh my gosh. And it's because my name got thrown into the ring because the current regional director had become the vice president. And see, this is why you should never miss anything. I had missed the convention in Las Vegas that year. So he wanted to see if I was interested in the job. They threw my name in, and I said, well, I don't know I have no idea what I'd be doing, but okay. He said, we'll train you. Come to Vegas, or come to Indianapolis, and we're going to train you in a special training with somebody else who's in the same boat. And I said, okay. So I did that, and so I became the West Central Regional Director, which is different now because all the regions are all different. So back then I oversaw chapters in Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Idaho, and New Mexico. And again, I had tough jobs. I had to close a couple of chapters that weren't performing, but that's what you had to do. But our region was in some tough places, but I eventually got us up to where we needed to be, and I'm proud to say that we took home the #1 region award in 2004. I had a great management team that worked with me and a great set of chapter advisors that I'm fortunate enough to still talk to today. So then I transitioned after moving back to Buffalo and became a vice president. And that was something I was fortunate enough to do for a couple of years, then took another break. And then I was tapped on the shoulder to become, they asked if I wanted to run for a position for the board of directors. And that was in 2009, and I was only 30 years old. And when you think of board of directors, if you're like me, you think of really old people, right? Gray-haired men sitting around a table, at least I do. And I had said to Dan and Gary was the then CEO of Alpha Kappa Psi, I'm not sure what I could contribute. I've only been back in the business for 5 years, and it sounds like a lot of work. And they were going to do a strategic plan, and I wasn't even sure how I could help. But they said to me, we need you. You've held a lot of different positions within Alpha Kappa Psi. You've seen small chapters, small regions, and you're in small business. And we'd like to have your insight. And you're the right person for the right seat on the bus. So I said, okay, I'm game if you are. So I was elected to a position for 3 years. And for me, I may not have said a lot at those meetings, but I listened a lot and I spoke up when necessary. And I was even secretary for a year. And when I look back at that, I can't believe I did it, but it taught me so much. And I was able to interact with high-level executives from all over the country to help improve Alpha Kappa Psi. And I did it because Alpha Kappa Psi helped me get my first job out of college, and it helped me continue to hone my leadership skills outside the classroom and in college, and outside my career after college. I've been on 3 other boards here locally since that time, and I'm still on 2 of them. And like I just said, I'm president of one of them. And it probably would not have happened without Alpha Kappa Psi. And my ability to speak in public, some of that had to do with DECA, but a lot of that had to do with Alpha Kappa Psi. So I'll turn it back over to Mackenzie.
That is great to hear. So a lot of people always kind of forget about that, but just you have to remember that even if you don't quite think you're ready, if somebody else thinks you are, it might be worth giving it a shot. So as we kind of wrap up, we're going to highlight just a few on the screen. We've got some of the resources that we touched on earlier about the women in business. Just take a brief moment, look at those. They are listed on the handout that was attached to the webinar. Now we are going to move into the questions and comments portion of the webinar. We've gotten some already in, and if you have any additional questions, please be sure to submit those through the questions box. So the first question we have is going to be from Carrie Bentley, and she wants to know, she says that she hasn't had any leadership positions yet, but she feels like she has the qualities of a leader. Do you think that's going to hurt her in the future? She's really interested in being like a COO or a CEO and worried that not having those positions is going to hurt her.
No, absolutely not. If she feels like she has the ability, speak up. If she can, at the chapter level, ask. See if there's something that you can do now. And if not, if there's other clubs that you're involved in, you just have to speak up, that's all. And if it's not now while you're in college, then, after. It's not too late. It's never too late. And once you get out of college and you're working someplace, you'll be able to show your leadership qualities in other ways. It doesn't mean that you have to have it on your resume to prove it. You'll be able to prove it in the workplace just by your work ethic. So don't worry about having it on your resume. But see what you can do now. You have to speak up, that's all.
Good. Carrie's also interested in knowing, you mentioned that your dad, he didn't start the business himself, but he purchased it from someone else. But what are some of the difficulties that he had in kind of growing the business and that you've seen in growing it even further?
Very good question. I would say the biggest thing is that my dad, if you may have noticed, my dad didn't go to college, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but my dad had to learn everything on his own. So when you say a difficulty, I'm sure my dad hasn't told me nearly any of the difficulties that he had, but my dad went out and got a loan from one of his neighbors to buy the business. One of his difficulties was getting the prior owner out of the business. He tried to pay him off early, and the other owner wouldn't go away. So that's just one of the difficulties he had. But one of the struggles my dad has said, I mentioned they had 8 employees and now we have 63, is people. And if any of you do own your own business someday, and even if you don't, you're going to hear it time and time again. People is the biggest challenge you're going to have no matter what. It's the biggest universal challenge. And my dad has said, I've heard over the years that there's times where he wishes we didn't get as big as we are, because it's just such a struggle every day. It's just more people, more problems. So that's probably the biggest challenge.
So going off that, so say somebody wants to own their own business, where do you think that they should start?
I think I don't want it to sound cliche, but finding a mentor would probably be the biggest thing. If you have an idea of what you want to do, find somebody that already does it so that you can ask them as many questions as possible before you start jumping into what you want to do. And trial and error, ask them as many questions is what I would say before you start doing all the research and looking online and all that kind of stuff. But try to find somebody, whether it's a friend or locally or joining business groups locally, the Chamber of Commerce and, for networking, that sort of thing. But, having even just a friend and business friend and somebody to bounce ideas off of. I've had a family friend that I met when I was 16, 17 years old. That boyfriend I talked about from Delta Sigma Pi, the one that in college there, his parents' best friends have been my mentors since that time. I still have dinner with them a couple of times a year and go visit them in Jackson Hole, Wyoming to go skiing with them. They live here part-time and out there part-time, and they're in a totally different business, but I talk to them about business when I go see them, and they've been my mentors ever since that time period. So find someone that you can talk to about your ideas.
That's great. We've got another question here from Carrie. She wants to know, how did you get on all the different boards that you're on? You mentioned with Alpha Kappa Psi, you had been the regional director and moved up. What about the other two boards?
The one board that I'm on, it's called the Academy of Finance, and it's at my local high school that I attended high school at. And I was recommended to it by my DECA advisor, actually. And it's funny, and this is a true story. Last week, I was asked to be on 3 boards. So once you get on a board, people will keep asking you. And once you show those leadership qualities, people start asking you because you find people don't want to do that kind of thing. The older we get, the less time that we have. So it's very difficult to find people that want to make the time commitment. And I had to turn all 3 of those down last week. I don't have the time. Last week it was the Chamber of Commerce, another construction group, and I race sailboats in my spare time, and it was the yacht club that I'm a member of. They asked me. I'm like, wow, thank you, but no, I can't, so sorry. The one that I'm on now, that I'm the president of, I've been on since I moved back, and that's because I filled someone else's position within the company just as a salesperson. I said, well, I'll start going, and I just kept going and going, and they just recognized me as somebody that would be good in a leadership position. So when to me, it's one of those things, when people recognize it, they see it and they ask. So, but it's not to say, the meeting I was at this morning, somebody spoke up and said, well, I want to do it. And they said, okay. So like the other question somebody asked first, it's not to say you can't speak up also, because people want that. So it can go both ways.
Good. We have a question coming in from Courtney, and she wants to know, how do you ensure they can get your point across tactfully without seeming like an emotional, irrational woman?
That is a very good question, because I think there is such a fine line between that. And I think sometimes I'm still even learning how to do that. I wear my emotions on my face, I've been told, and my heart on my sleeve sometimes. So I have learned to think before you speak, and a lot of times gather your thoughts even before coming up with a response for things, because sometimes it's not going to come out the right way, especially if it's not going to be something positive or if it's going to be constructive, because Another example I'll give, when I was asked to be on another board, one of these other boards in the last week, that was another male-dominating construction group, and I told my father about it, and he said, well, that would be a good one for you to join. And I said, to me, it's not, because it's mostly male egos. And he said, yeah, but it would still be good for you. And I said, I'm not going to get a word in edgewise, so I don't see why not. And he said, you just need to speak up. And to me, then women, and I think maybe this is where the question's going with, but sometimes women then are perceived as pushy, or you can probably use some other words there that I won't. And it is a fine line that we have to balance. So I feel that in most cases I've been able to do that. Not all the time, because sometimes when you're perceived as strong, it can come out the other way. But we're not all perfect, so we just have to keep working on that. I hope I answered that question, but that person can email me if they want on the side, and maybe we can work on that together.
Excellent. We are just about out of time, so we're going to ask just one last question. It's going to be, what can all these students on the call here today, what can they still do while they're in college to help set them apart?
I think internships are great, and leadership positions within the chapter or any other organizations that they're a part of. That will set them apart from their peers. And all of you that are on the call, you're a part of Alpha Kappa Psi, so you're already ahead of your peers when you're applying for positions to other companies. So you're already doing something that's amazing. But to give yourselves just another leg up, I would say you're going to find your passion or what you don't like if you can do an internship, and having any other leadership roles is definitely going to help you.
Great. So that's all the time that we do have for today. I want to thank all of our participants and callers for all your guys' great questions and comments today. I think they've been really good questions. For any additional follow-up, or if we didn't get to any of your questions, please feel free to contact Jen. All of her information is on the screen. Lastly, we do have upcoming programs listed on the aksi.org website. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please send them to education@aksi.org. Again, I want to thank